Welcome everyone. Part-time trader here with the weekly market view. Great to be back with you. This is the second in a series of weekly videos that I will be uploading to the new YouTube channel. These hopefully give me an opportunity over the next 30 to 40 minutes to pad out and give you a little bit more detail on some of the ideas that I'm posting regularly over on X. If you haven't followed me on X, it's at Part-Time Charts, which is the same name that you can catch me by here on YouTube. It's great to be back with you. Looking forward to spending a bit of time talking you through my view on markets. This week, I wanted to focus really heavily on commodity markets where I see huge opportunities for investors that are looking to protect and grow their capital during a period of turmoil for traditional markets. We will get into that in a moment in a big way, kicking off with the gold chart. But before I go any further, I do want to stress that anything you hear in today's video is purely for entertainment purposes. This channel was designed as an opportunity for me to share ideas and thoughts on the market. The clue is in the name. I am a part-time trader. I'm not an investment professional. I'm someone who has worked hard to hone my skills and hopefully bring a little bit of value to your world. But I do so in the name of entertainment only, and I certainly wouldn't recommend that anybody makes investment or financial decisions off the back of my analysis. So enjoy the video. I hope you find it useful and interesting, but please do not make investment decisions off the back of some of what I'm going to be talking you through in the next half an hour. Right, let's kick off with the gold chart. So last week I talked you through, I suppose, my underpinning thesis on markets, which is that I believe we are at the start of a major downturn for indexes like the S&P 500 and for the Nasdaq, and that I anticipate that over the next couple of years there is so much systemic risk built up in the system that the Nasdaq will decline by something like 70 to 75%, and during that time Bitcoin will be hammered even harder, potentially ending up trading in the region of about $3,000 to $5,000. Now, lots of people think that that is impossible. It's absolutely your prerogative to believe that I'm crazy, but I think if you go and check out my previous video, there were lots of fundamental and technical reasons for my belief that hopefully might help persuade you that some of my views hold some sort of weight. Regardless, today what I'm going to talk you through is the other side of that coin, which is that as equities and crypto get hit hard over the next couple of years, I anticipate that we will see major upside for commodity markets. And we'll kick off with the gold chart. I suppose lots of people ask me, how am I thinking about positioning and investing over the coming years to protect and grow my wealth? And the starting point for me is the gold chart. So what we saw over the last quarter is a massive breakout, this downtrend that has capped price from 1980 through to 2011, and then briefly capped price at the end of 2024, has now been broken to the upside. And this comes off the back of a period of about 3 years where the gold price was consolidating and building a head of steam before breaking up to the upside with huge momentum. And I have reason to believe, looking at this chart, that we are still relatively early in the move for gold, and that at some point over the coming years, it's possible that we see gold trading significantly higher, possibly as high as $10,000. And so the starting point for me when I'm thinking about where to place my capital is gold is going to be a big, big winner. And I don't just see gold being a big winner versus the US dollar. This is the S&P priced in gold, which, as you can see here, has already started to break down. And I think this was one of the first major warning signs back here when this uptrend broke back in the summer of last year, that trouble was on the horizon for equity markets. And it was at that point I started calling for really serious caution as people were thinking about plowing money into capital markets like equities and like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Now look, this downtrend, you can debate how significant a trend line that dates back to 2011 is. It has supported price on a number of occasions and pushed the S&P higher relative to gold. You might argue that this is nothing more than a short-term breakdown. But if I'm right, and this is a major top for the S&P versus gold, I point to the last two major tops as examples of what can happen. So in the early 1970s, which is the period that I think is most analogous to where we are now, characterized by stagnating economic growth and huge inflationary pressures on the consumer. When we saw the S&P top out versus gold in the early 1970s, it was a decade before the S&P bottomed versus gold and then started to appreciate again. And similarly, when we saw the same thing happen when S&P put in a major top versus gold in the year 2000, it wasn't until the year 2011 that the S&P bottomed and began to outperform gold for the next decade and a half. And during that time, the S&P, just in dollar terms, if you look back at the top that was put in the early 70s, again, it was a decade before the S&P started to see new highs in dollar terms. And here is the peak of the dot-com bubble in the year 2000. Again, it wasn't until 2013 that the S&P started to hold new highs in US dollar terms. So if I'm right, and this is the first sign of much more significant weakness in equity markets, it could be the case that we don't see equity markets back at these prices for at least 10 years. That is a seismic shift for investors to grapple with. And many are calling it a capital rotation event. Whatever you see it as, I think it is becoming clearer to me that commodities led by gold are likely to outperform the S&P and equity markets for some time to come. And it isn't just equity markets. I talked you through my belief that Bitcoin will be trading significantly lower over the next couple of years. And you can see that versus the price of gold, there are technical reasons to believe that Bitcoin will underperform gold for the next couple of years at least. This trend line that goes back all the way back to 2013 is held for the best part of a decade, providing support to the price of Bitcoin relative to gold. Every time we hit it, we saw a significant bounce. And Bitcoin has, without a doubt, been the best performing asset over the last 15 years. But we are starting to see that trend versus gold slow down. And we haven't been able to sustain new highs for the last 4 or 5 years. I said back in December that swiping these highs twice on a monthly basis and closing back underneath on the monthly was not a good sign. I used this red hammer to symbolize my view that markets had topped, and since then price has pulled back significantly, and is down something like 20 to 30% versus the price of gold. And you can see this blue projection here. I'm anticipating that trend will continue at least for the next couple of years. Eventually, I do see Bitcoin outperforming gold again, but I think the slowdown is likely to last quite some time before we see that outperformance from Bitcoin again relative to gold. And if you zoom in a little bit, I go back into some of the lower time frames. This secondary uptrend, which has been supporting the price of Bitcoin in gold terms since the bottom of the market in 2023, has held many times, but has actually just given way over the last couple of weeks. And I believe that this is setting the scene for a much bigger, more sustained crash in the price of Bitcoin. So look, first principles for me, gold is the place to be if you want to protect, preserve, and grow your capital. And if you're feeling particularly bold, you want to try and find assets that are likely to outperform gold in that time. And one of those assets for me is silver. So silver has, and I know this is a bit of a meme pattern, but silver to me looks like a giant 45-year cup and handle pattern that is likely to break at some point this year. And when it does, I think that sets the scene for a really explosive move to the upside. Again, I keep saying that market conditions at the moment remind me of the 1970s. I'm a bit too young to remember the 70s, but if you look back at what price did during that period over a decade, the price of silver appreciated by 2,650%. So that's a near 27x return on your capital if you were an early investor during the inflationary and stagflationary crisis during the 1970s. And I think the same is going to be true again. That when I look at the price of silver and I look at a measured move, you take the gap between the top and the bottom of this cup and you place it at the breakout, and it gives you something like a 1000% 10x move from the breakout to highs of about $400. It's likely that that move takes the best part of the next 5 to 10 years to play out, but those returns are huge. And I know lots of people that follow me for my cryptocurrency analysis. All I would do is ask people to have an open mind about what the markets might look like over the coming years. I think all of us have become obsessed with chasing the outsized returns that cryptocurrency has proven to produce for investors. Very few actually make it out with any of that capital, but that's another point. We're all chasing those outsized returns, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case that cryptocurrencies are the assets to produce those returns. I believe that the commodities market is a huge opportunity for us over the coming years, and that silver is going to be one of the strongest beneficiaries of that trend. What else might outperform gold? So look, these are gold miners versus the price of gold. Gold miners, investors in gold miners have been really, really frustrated in recent years. I mean, gold miners have underperformed gold for 17 years now, since the great financial crisis of 2008. And in the last few years where gold and silver have performed really well, you've seen proper stagnation, sometimes decline in gold miners. And that has frustrated a lot of investors because they're expecting that their returns will be matched to the performance of gold. And I think eventually they will be. I have reason to believe that we will see a significant move in gold miners over the coming years, but we need a break of this downtrend. And again, lots of people know that I love this pattern, a sort of lead-in phase, a major bump to the downside, consolidation, and then when we get a downtrend break, I expect that we will see a move of about 300% versus the price of gold. Now remember, this is miners versus the price of gold, not the price of US dollar. So if gold goes up by 200-300% over the coming years and miners outperform gold, you are talking about really significant upside for miners. So again, for me, first principle is gold is king. Second principle is how can I find assets that might outperform gold during the commodities bull run, and silver and gold miners look particularly attractive to me. Another asset that looks really attractive to me, I've posted this chart multiple times on X, but I see platinum building this really solid base over the last sort of 12 to 15 years, where price in the $800 region has been supported time and time again by buyers. And we are now getting compressed between this long-term support zone at $800 and this downtrend that has been in place since the great financial crisis. When that downtrend breaks, and I suspect it will happen soon, I'm anticipating a really big move to the upside for platinum. And again, just to flesh out why I'm particularly bullish on platinum, this is platinum priced in gold. And you can see that for the best part of 20 years, we've been trading in this huge, gigantic, what do we call this? A sloping channel, a downward channel. And we've also had a downward channel to top off the end of this move, I believe, of platinum in a downtrend versus gold. And we are starting to bottom out. I first posted this chart many months ago. We're starting to bottom out at the bottom of this channel. And when this falling channel breaks to the upside, I suspect something like the price action outlined here, that will again, remember this is platinum priced in gold, not in US dollars. So if gold is appreciating versus US dollars, I expect that platinum will appreciate even faster and will present massive opportunities for people who take early positions in precious metals like platinum. So look, what does that mean for how I'm positioning myself? Well, I've been looking for some time equities that allow me to take advantage of the appreciation I anticipate in assets like gold and platinum and silver. And one of those assets I've been particularly interested in is CMCL, Caledonia Mining Corporation, which is listed both in the US and in Canada. The US and the UK. And this is a relatively small cap gold mining stock that, from a technical perspective, I just think shows lots of promise. So you'll see that this this bottom support zone on the chart has held a support and resistance many times for a long period of time that stretches way back into the 1980s. And we're now getting compression between the higher time frame support zone and the higher time frame resistance zone. And it's my belief that at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to see a break to the upside when it's sloping downtrend and this horizontal resistance zone give way. And just look at the upside in front of us if it does. Look at this. To me, there is very little resistance once we break past that $20 mark, that $18 to $20 mark. And it could mean a move back into the $350 to $400 zone, which is huge. So that would represent something like a 30x move. Again, the type of gains that people only associate with cryptocurrency, but I do genuinely believe that the upside in front of us in commodity markets is massive. There are a few plays out there that really excite me, and this is one of them. Another that really excites me is in the silver market, where a company called First Majestic Silver Corp, otherwise known as AG, is the symbol that you can search for in TradingView. We are starting to see, if we look at the 3-month chart, this really clearly defined higher time frame support zone, which is held as resistance and then support and support for many years, dating back to 2007. Looks to have confirmed a break towards the upside as we've broken out of this sloping downtrend that has lasted for about 4 years. We've back tested it. I believe we are now on the brink of a major move to the upside, and you're already starting to see, if you look at the last couple of weekly candles, last week we put in a 10% candle to the upside. This week it looks like a 13% candle to the upside. We are starting to see big moves, but I believe those moves will look insignificant compared to what is about to come. So I believe that there is at least 250 to 300% worth of upside before we revisit the previous all-time highs. And if we begin to flip those highs, as I've projected here with this blue squiggle, then that would open the door to much more upside. And a measured move, which is, if you look at this as a sort of rectangle consolidation, a measured move that replicates the scale of the move from down here to the highs. If we replicate that again, that would take us potentially to a price of $130, $140 plus. And again, what does that mean from where we are now? That means potentially 20x returns for people to take an early position in this. Now, obviously, by no means guaranteed, but technically, I really like the look of this. And fundamentally, looking at what a period of stagflation would mean for the broader economy, there are lots of reasons to believe that silver is going to be a major winner as we head deeper into this stagflationary crisis. Right, last few charts now. So going back to platinum, one of the assets that I'm most bullish on in the world of platinum mining is Platinum Group Metals. They are a company that is listed in New York and in Canada. And again, people that have followed me for a while know that I just love this kind of bump and run style pattern where you get a lead in, big bump to the downside, consolidation, eventually the downtrend, which you see here, breaks. This time it looks like we've flipped it to support on the monthly chart. And I would be looking for a break of these highs, the 2024 highs. If we start to hold above there at about $2, I think that opens the door for much more upside. And eventually, I anticipate that we revisit the origin of this move to the downside. So that would mean going from where we are today up into the region of about $60, which again is close to a 50x move. And these are the type of numbers that, you know, in recent years you've only really historically associated with altcoins and really kind of illiquid crypto assets. If I'm right, and those types of gains are available to us through the commodities market, that gives me, you know, a huge reason to sit up and pay attention when I look at charts like this. And I will just wrap up briefly. So I've talked about gold, I've talked about silver, I've talked about platinum, I've talked about the equities that I'm starting to build positions in that allow me to take advantage of the trends that I see for gold, platinum, and silver over the coming years. The last one that I will end on is oil. Now, this is a slightly trickier chart for me. You know, whereas I look at this in isolation, I would say so far we've got a series of lower highs and a sloping downtrend into a flat base of support that starts to look something like a descending triangle, which is typically a bearish or a topping pattern that could potentially mean we start to break this support here and head down into the $50 region per barrel of oil. And that is still a possibility by all means. And I think if we begin to close on a monthly basis down below this support block here, I would absolutely be open-minded about more upside. But the reason that I am leaning bullish on this is partly because if you accept that gold looks incredibly bullish and that we've just achieved a major breakout on the price of gold versus the US dollar, then this chart here, which is the correlation between the price of gold and the price of oil over the last 50 to 60 years, is really, really interesting. Every time we've seen a major move to the upside in gold, such as in the 1970s, oil was very closely behind. And we saw the same again from the year 2000 up into about 2011. We saw the price of gold appreciate significantly and oil went with it. Now they've decoupled over the last year and oil has been edging lower and consolidating while gold has broken to new highs. But I expect at some point in the near future, oil is going to pick up and will boom to prices that many people, again, would think are unfathomable and unrealistic. So I'm not going to go into the detail of, you know, how I'm positioning myself for that potential upcoming boom in oil prices. There are lots of examples of charts that you can find on my X account at Part-Time Charts. I'm particularly interested in and bullish on UK listed small cap oil companies. I think the UK energy sector is due for a resurgence and the technicals certainly point to that being the case. But needless to say, incredibly bullish on commodities, excited about what the future holds for gold and for silver. And like I say, I see this as a real opportunity, not just to protect myself throughout a crisis, but potentially even to grow in real terms, you know, my capital. So that's it from me. Next week, I will get back to some of the basics on cryptocurrencies and equities. I know there were some requests to cover charts like Netflix and a few altcoins. I will definitely come back to those for you next Friday. For now, I wanted to give you a bit of a view on how I'm positioning myself over the next couple of years and why I believe to some extent that commodities and commodity equities are the new altcoins. Huge gains ahead if I'm right. Hope you enjoyed the analysis. Remember, not financial advice, but if you liked the analysis, if you enjoyed for entertainment purposes the video, please do smash the subscribe button. Help me grow the channel. Help me bring you even more content over the coming months and years. Right. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. I will speak to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.